I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the November 17th, 2021 meeting of the Schertz Capital Improvement Advisory Committee. Item number 1 on the agenda was to call the meeting to order. Seat an alternate if required. We have none. Hearing of residents. Did anybody sign up to speak? Tiffany? No? All righty. Item number 4 is a public hearing. Hold a public hearing, consider and file the semi-annual report evaluating the progress of the city on achieving the capital improvements program and identifying any problems in implementing the plans or administering the capital recovery fees. Welcome. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'd like to share with you this evening our semi-annual report on impact fees and how they are going towards our capital improvement projects. We have had some expenses to our capital impact fee funds. They are primarily coming from our water and sewer funds. We are in the middle of doing a water and sewer master plan as well as impact fee study. Because they are impacting both the water and both the wastewater, those charges are spread out between the two funds. The total together comes to a little over almost $29,000. We also had a charge of about $1,500,000. It's a management fee for the sewer impact fees. So total charges to our impact fees were $30,362.75. We are in the black in all of our categories, and so the funding's looking good. In addition to impact fees, we also had project expenses, with our largest going towards water. We have 2 projects in water. One is the Corbett ground storage tank, and while that picture on the right is not the Corbett ground storage tank, it's just to give you an idea of what one looks like. It'll complement the Corbett elevated storage tank, a good thing for our residents to expand our capacity and be able to provide them with water. The Corbett elevated storage tank is a complete project. We're wrapping up the expenses on that, so some of them have fallen through on this particular reporting period. Now going forward, that may be dropping off and you won't see that anymore. And the Corbett ground storage tank will actually be increasing because we are in the design phase of that. This is the eve of an exciting day for us. Tomorrow is our kickoff meeting for the Woman Hollering wastewater line project. That is going to be exciting. So next time we'll be in front of you, we'll probably have more details for that, expenses and timelines. And then we had a small expenditure for our roadway impact fees. And that was from Area 1. We have had some annexes for the city of Schertz, and so we need to make amendments to our capital improvements plan for streets, and that is what that charge is for. That being said, I have a great team here, James with finance and Kathy with engineering, and I'm here so we can, if you have any questions, I'm sure we can answer them for you.
Turn my microphone on. This is a public hearing. So at this time, I'll ask if anyone in the audience would like to address the committee about this report. Now would be the time to do it. Feel free to step up and don't get trampled. Yes. All right. Nobody wants to speak tonight? All righty. Okay, gentlemen, anybody have any questions? Would you like to see someone run through the numbers, or you satisfied with reviewing them in the packet? No questions?
Satisfied.
No? Okay. And I think this is, don't we recommend to City Council? Yeah. Okay. So if no one has any...
I have a question.
Oh, all right. Go ahead, Richard.
I woke up. What's the timeline for the capital, what is it? CIP? Capital improvement document? We're working on a new capital improvement plan, right?
Well, I'm not sure I'm understanding the question directly. Are you referring to the master plan we're talking
Master
about?
plan, yeah.
Kathy, when is that one coming in? Thank you. Late spring, early summer is when we'll have, it's a master plan for our water and wastewater system for all the infrastructure, and we also will have an impact fee study to go along with that.
And that's going to come back to this committee? Okay. Late spring, early summer? Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? If not, we need a motion to either to forward this to City Council with, is it the regular approve and deny? I haven't done one of these for a while, so, yeah. All righty, so we're looking for a motion to send this on to City Council with our recommendation to either, in my words, accept it or not accept it, if someone would like to make that motion.
I'll make the motion.
Hang on, go ahead, Brian. Okay. Go ahead.
I motion to forward to City Council for approval the semi-annual report as presented. I second.
All right, so we have a motion to send this on to City Council recommending approval. That motion was made by Mr. Platt, seconded by Mr. James. Is there any further discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. 6 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number 5, adjournment of the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee. This meeting is adjourned. And Mr. James and Dr. Pinsorn, thank you very much for your assistance this evening. We appreciate it. Commissioners, need to pull that for discussion. If not, we'll accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, a motion that we accept the meeting, or the consent agenda items as presented.
Second?
Who was that, Richard?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda from Commissioner Odom, a second from Commissioner Broad. There's no discussion on the consent agenda. I'll call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 4 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number 5 is public hearing. Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the City Council if necessary. So we have 2 public hearings this evening. On the first is ZC 2021-014, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on an amendment of Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 15, subsection 21.15.4, utilities.
Hello again. What we'd like to do is propose to you to update a section in Article 15. And it's specifically related to the installation and location of utilities. And by utilities, I mean electric, natural gas, telecommunications, cable, all the utilities that you would see perhaps attached to a pole. The current language in Article 15, as you see in your attachment, is literally a paragraph, and that's the entire article. And it has 4 main points to it. And it basically stated that all utilities shall be located in a front yard, underground, maintained according to city codes. If they are above ground, it should be on steel poles, and these requirements can be waived by city manager or designee. Now, I put that in just succinct bullet points, but that is primarily what was included in that paragraph. What we'd like to do is eliminate that paragraph and replace it with a much more robust article. And what this article would do for us is actually provide some parameters where the city, we could protect this infrastructure of the city, where we would locate our utilities, and just clean that up, as well as, well, lots of benefits. Let me get to it. The amended article, again, to put it succinctly, we identified where to put underground and overhead, primarily based on primary and secondary lines, your electric lines. Primary lines being what you think of and you see the big poles with the big lines going down the side of a highway. They take the power from the substation to a transformer. Your secondary distribution is from that transformer that actually goes to your electric meter. So it's much smaller, but there are much more of those. What we want to do is take the majority underground, and for benefits I'll get into in just a moment. But we also understand that sometimes there's the upfront cost of installing everything underground, and so we want to be sensitive to our customers and our developers, et cetera. So we maintain some flexibility in this rewrite that would allow us to look at overhead and underground. Of course, the intent is to go underground, but where it might make sense to go overhead, that's what we define the ability. So it makes it easier or more simple for staff to communicate and understand, as well as for our customers to do the same thing. What we did was, while we considered the primary and secondary distribution, we also then identified our zoning areas. So you have residential. In residential, it would go underground. If there's a waiver granted, and one of the benefits of this rewrite is that there is a specific, it's a defined process for granting a waiver. It's also a defined process to allow the person to appeal that if they don't agree with the decision. So again, this rewrite clarifies for both the city and the customer. But the residential would go underground, as well as public use. And by public use, that's your parks, your playgrounds, your ball fields. Makes sense to go underground. But then you have your apartments, your commercial, your industrial. Again, the intent is to go underground with a focus on underground within that development. So if it makes sense in this case that overhead would be allowed, we define that overhead would basically be along a single side. So you don't have a development, an apartment complex with utility poles and lines around the entire complex. Again, it cleans it up. The intent is to have utilities on one side of the road, so you don't have that going down both sides. We do currently have that now. We have some utilities going on both sides of the road. We have a mix of wooden poles. We have a mix of steel poles, underground and overhead. And what we're trying to do is make a cohesive, again, direction. We also currently have some conflict of who maintains easements, whether or not that's the city or is it the resident. We want to include some language in here that would clean that up, because right now we do have some property owners maintaining the easements, HOAs, property owner associations. We'd like just to clean that part up, make that clear, make the intent that overhead utilities go on one side of the right-of-way instead of going down both sides of the road. And this one's also important, another clarification in this rewrite. We have had some instances where a utility provider comes in and they want to maybe an expansion of FM 1518 is an exact example, where the utility provider believes that their standards override the city standards. Well, of course, the city wants what the city wants for the best for the city of Schertz. So we put in here the city standards would come first and the utility provider second, again offering some clarification, hopefully to mitigate those differences going forward. The other difference is that we have a defined process where waivers can be granted by the city manager or the director of public works, and again, there is an appeal process to that, but it has parameters. Some of the benefits of this rewrite, as I said, it provides clarity on where your primary and secondary electrical distribution should be placed, cleaning that up on our thoroughfares, so we don't have a hodgepodge of wires running through a residential development. And it promotes underground versus overhead for a variety of reasons. One of the benefits with underground is that it increases safety. You obviously, with it being underground, decrease the possibility of human contact. With less overhead poles, it clears up driver's visibility. It's improved along the public rights-of-way. It improves your aesthetics. You have less visual clutter. If you can, imagine nobody wants to look out their window and see a bunch of poles and lines. And in doing so, by increasing safety and aesthetics, we can also have the opportunity to, property values would increase. Another main benefit of underground is that it increases the hardiness of a system. Going underground, you have fewer outages caused by weather, vehicular accidents, animals cause quite a few. Fallen tree limbs, it's going overhead. Maintenance of tree trimming is huge. That's because they're part of a big cause of outages. Public support, there's a lot of public support out there for promoting underground. And then, of course, underground, there's lower operation and maintenance costs. While we, the city of Schertz, don't maintain the poles and power lines, obviously that savings would be passed on to our residents through the utility company. And we do mention steel poles as another in our UDC, and that's as a benefit. They too, you have reduced damage from vehicular impact. They also are less susceptible to weather-related outages, and they too they don't have wood rot or damage from insects, animals, and birds. Which again, the benefit of going underground and if we have to go overhead, to use steel poles. We'd like to recommend that you would approve this change to Article 15, and before you do, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Once again, this is a public hearing. Anyone like to address the commission on this subject? No. Okay. Last chance? All right. No public input. Commissioners?
Oh, I have a question. Paragraph J, you mentioned outdoor lighting meeting the standards of Randolph, JBSA Randolph. Where are those standards kept, and what's the process to get their approval?
You're asking me a question I can't answer. Do you know?
We're about to adopt it. I hope we have some idea what
Maybe not in this room.
what we're going to do.
So, as you know, the Department of Defense has those standards, and we can get them from the civil engineering group that's headquarters there at Lackland or Kelly, but that's where those requirements come from. And we just transpose those from other requirements.
So we transpose the requirements and we show that to the developer. Is there any input or any interaction with Randolph, or we just say, you have to meet these standards?
We would just meet those standards.
Okay.
I mean, I assume it's for night flying and, pit training and all that other stuff.
Yeah. I've heard the night flying is going to increase substantially when they get the new aircraft. But that's hearsay for this point. But
Right.
so we're going to incorporate Randolph standards. I'm concerned about our interaction with Randolph, and I want to keep Randolph happy with all this stuff that we're doing. But if we just transpose their requirement, their standard, into our document and reference that for the developers, how do we know when it changes? Do we have somebody that's going to keep up with that, or is we going to depend on Randolph to let us know?
We can engage with the CE group and see how they, I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point, and
Yeah, I would suggest maybe put an annual checklist up there and go call Randolph on an annual basis, or check the standards on an annual basis. I'd hate to put some stuff out there one day and have Randolph come knocking on the door and be a little bit unhappy with us.
understand.
If we're gonna use their standards, there has to be some process where we keep up to date on what they're doing.
Sure.
And I don't think it needs to be in here. I think it needs to be some kind of internal process in Public Works.
So these standards would probably be where, in the design manual or some document?
There is a Public Works design document, and so if Public Works, this would fall under Public Works, I'm
Okay,
quite sure,
all right.
so we would put it in there.
Okay. Anyone else?
I've got a couple of things for you.
Go ahead.
Let's start with the first one. Same section under J. There's a wording that says the city of Schertz or utility provider may require the installation of conduit by the subdivider, developer, property owner in this case. Having been in the industry of running underground cabling and AD and cable, I don't know a provider that would not require you to put it in conduit. So, kind of, I don't like seeing that in there. I think that's going to turn into they're always going to require it, and the added cost on the developers, on the individuals who own that property, is going to be substantially higher in some cases where it may not be necessary or needed.
So if I understand you correctly,
I'd like it to be
If we-
removed. Take it. The city can require it if your personnel say, okay, this makes sense. But if the utility provider has the option, they're always going to take that option. And the way that this is worded is it's at their leisure.
I see what you're saying. Can I clarify that?
If it's approved by the city, if it makes sense, obviously yes. But if they're just given the opportunity to say, well, of course we want it, they're always going to require it.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then the second part, same section. I just give you an example. If I own a couple acres of land, a smaller street that I inherited, city comes along and says, we're going to make some improvements here. We're going to put streetlights in front of your property. I don't have the money to pay for that. I don't think a lot of people have the money to pay for that and the costs associated with it. But the way that this is written, that very last part says that the property owner, regardless of who that person is responsible for those costs, and they can be pretty significant.
Right, and the intent would be on this one, and if we need to clarify the wording, I'm happy to do that, because the intent, if we were coming in, being we, the city, if the city was coming in and, say, expanding a road, or we would not expect a private property owner to put the lights on that road. But if that's the interpretation, then you're right, it probably needs to be clarified, because,
Well, that's how I read it. That's
Sure.
the way it's worded. So if there's something different there, that would make more sense. But
A partner document to these are the franchise agreements with our different providers, NBU, GVEC, and CPS. In those franchise agreements, if a street is widened, it is incumbent upon the franchisees. It's written specifically in there for that. And so that would be their cost to absorb, not the property owner. Now, if the property owner wants to do something to their property, it is incumbent upon them as the property owner. And that is across the board with all three utility providers. Is that?
if the city's coming in and expanding a roadway,
Yep.
and my property runs along that roadway, I say, no, don't do anything in front of my property, how would you handle that situation? I understand what you're saying with the agreements with the utility providers, But there will never be a situation in which a property owner will be forced to cover these costs because of
Not if
this wording?
we're increasing the right-of-way. That's incumbent upon us.
I think part of, at least what's going through my mind right now, this requirement deals with private metered streetlights. And typically what you see along a residential street or in a subdivision in the park, those are not private. Those are public for use of and an individual doesn't pay that bill. But if I have a piece of property, a rural property that I want, and I ask GVC or CPS to come out and install a light, that's going to be, I think, a private metered street light, which I then am responsible for. So I really don't, we're not talking about the ones you see up and down the streets and then all the subdivisions, although gated subdivisions come to mind, but those are probably not private either.
Well, I look at it as the next portion of this that we're looking at is a piece of property that was a holdover. So there is a build-out, a developer next to it on both sides, and they're stuck in the middle. So in that situation, if the developer comes through and pays those fees, and the city pays those fees, that person is stuck in the middle of that, and they will as well have to cover those costs.
Yeah,
Does
so
that make sense what I'm
if
saying?
it's their meter, regardless if it's a light or whatever, it's their meter, and they're in the right-of-way, then yes, it is the property owner's. Right, Brian? Correct me if I'm wrong. If they're in the right-of-way, I'm sorry, and it's their meter, it's a private meter, and we expand it, it's not an easement, it's the property owner's responsibility in the right-of-way.
Tell me that one more time.
Okay.
I had my third booster yesterday.
So, he's got the situation is, private property owner has a meter in the right-of-way. City comes in and widens the right-of-way. It is incumbent upon the property owner at that point to move the meter and pay the associated cost, because they're not in an easement.
It's a meter associated with a private light?
Yes.
Yeah, then if it's not in an easement, it would be incumbent on the property owner, but I think now we require utilities to be in an easement, not in the right-of-way for this too.
That's
So
right.
They'd have to dedicate the easement.
They would have to dedicate the easement. So does that?
Perfect, makes sense.
Well,
Thank you.
is that-
Jimmy, you have anything? I've got a couple.
Okay?
One's a clarification. So when we talk about restricting the utilities to one side of the right-of-way, you're only talking about the overhead power lines, correct?
Yes.
That's the only place, okay. And then, and again, it's just some editing critique here that as we get into the definitions, item E, where we talk about apartment multifamily, you add a statement there about electrical primary distribution lines for or providing service to multifamily areas may be installed overhead along one side of the perimeter, and and so on. And then you do the same thing down here in commercial, okay? So I'm wondering, is that statement also applicable to residential, or we're not going to allow any overhead lines around the, I mean, how does the, it's been a long time since I've lived someplace where the power to my house didn't come from an underground electric line, okay? But that power has to come, somebody feeds power to Savannah Square. Okay, so if I can't have overhead lines in the, in other words, where's the provision for them to bring that overhead line and then service Savannah or Woodland Oaks or?
Well, you're right, meaning at some point, all underground is fed by an overhead. When it comes out of the substation, it comes out overhead. So contingent upon the design by the utility provider, that would be the answer to your question, but you're right in thinking that somewhere it's overhead. we're trying to eliminate that from actually being in your neighborhood.
Okay, but, you know, but we're allowing them along in multifamily, we're allowing them along a single side of the perimeter of a subdivision within a utility easement, or providing service to the subdivision utility service lines. Providing electric service to each lot within a subdivision must be installed in the I'm just curious why that entire statement doesn't also apply to residential.
We could,
No,
yeah, I'm thinking through this. Go ahead.
well, this is just my comments for you to think about. Okay, when you wrote this, if you had a specific reason for not putting them there, but I'm just throwing this out there, you know, to try to make this, it's something to think about. Should it be there or shouldn't it be there? That's,
So the intent on the multifamily was to give an opportunity to bring it overhead before you hit the transformer to step it down. If you look at, imagine the multifamily that's on 3009, right? You've got multiple buildings kind of spread out. What we don't want to do is have overhead internal to the whole complex, if you will. But we want to provide the flexibility to bring it up to the complex. And if they needed to bring it to the back, or it's over there by Murphy's and they wanted to come down the backside of the complex, that's why we were trying to give them some flexibility on the multifamily, commercial, and industrial. In residential, the intent is as soon as you're going underground. And so, but we do have some areas in southern Schertz where they come off of 3009, they hit a couple of H-frames before they step it down, right? So that's overhead, but then it goes underground for the entire neighborhood. But the intent, both from our meeting with folks, and of course what we've talked with council, is residential will be underground pretty much all the way around. So as soon as they come off a major thoroughfare, 3009, the Parkway, something like that, 1518, it's going to go underground for residential.
okay. Oh, and then my other comment was, well, I'm not sure because I see H in your cup. But anyway, when we get to waivers,
Okay.
in item 1, decision and appeal, the basic question is, after holding a hearing on the denial of the waiver, the city manager may either sustain the decision or grant the waiver, and that's the final decision. There's no appeal after the city manager.
We don't have that defined in this. I mean, realistically, a person could go to city council, but that's not what we defined in the UDC. Basically, the city manager would come, you know, after the public works director, and they could appeal. There's other routes, really, through the civic process.
All right, thank you. Anyone have anything else? Okay, this is an amendment, or a proposed amendment, to the UDC, and therefore is a city council decision. So what we're tasked with tonight is making a recommendation to city council on this proposed change. If someone would like to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve ZC 2021-014 to City Council with the clarification of the items that we brought to light here today.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Platt. Anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
And a second from Commissioner Odom. Now, I need to ask, because that's pretty broad. I mean, we brought up several issues, and honestly, the two that I brought up, I don't think need to be changed. I think that was food for thought for staff, whether they wanted to change it or not. So I think we need, if you want to make a motion, or if we're going to send a recommendation to City Council with with the exceptions or exclusions or recommended changes, I think we need to be a little more specific about what it is we want them to do. Now, you should know that most of city council, if not all of the council members, will watch the video of this meeting, and they will hear our discussion. So I think if there's something specific that you want changed or amended, anyway. Anyone else have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'll reference my comments. I ended up making a recommendation that they make an internal process within Public Works. I don't think it changes. My comments didn't intend to change what we're voting on.
All right, well, with that said, again, right now, and I don't have the specific words, but the motion and the second were to forward this to City Council with a recommendation of approval, pending the clarification of the items that we brought up for discussion. Does that summarize it pretty good?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Platt? Okay. So that's what you're voting on right now. All right, a call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Nay. That's 3 ayes and 1 opposed, and so without 4 votes, that motion fails. And again, I'll explain myself once again. It's just that's too vague a motion. You know, if I were to get that as a city council member, I'm not sure what you want me to do. You know.
So, Commissioner, before we table it, is there anything we can address this evening? Because we were trying to get this to council in December, given the schedules with councils.
I think I can motion again, but change the wording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take it. We can. Yeah.
Try to be a little more specific. Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve to City Council ZC 2021-014. As presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to recommend approval to City Council by Commissioner Platt, a second by Commissioner Broad. And again, Council's very good about when we're sending them something, they typically will come back and watch the video of this meeting. And so they will hear all of the comments that were made and concerns that we had. Okay. Any other discussion on that? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
4 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number B is another public hearing. ZC 2021-012, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 2.5 acres of land from single-family residential / agricultural district, RA, to Planned Development District, PDD, located at 7809 FM 1518 North, also known as Bear County Property Identification Number 1149102, City of Schertz, Bear County, Texas. Megan?
Good evening, Commission. Megan Harrison. This is for ZC 2021-012. This is for the Crossvine PDD 6th Amendment. So wanted to provide reference. So previously we did see the PDD 5th Amendment. So that amendment did surround this property, so it essentially made it kind of an outlier. And so since that PDD amendment, they have obtained this property. So therefore they're coming in to, add this into the Crossvine PDD. So FM 1518 and then Ware Seguin here at the bottom of the screen. So planning sent out 4 public hearing notices on November 5th, 2021. At the time of the staff report, we have not received any responses in favor or opposed. Here is the zoning exhibit. Again, this is the property, kind of a backwards L, if you would. So just to, so with the PDD amendment, it is going to adhere to Module 3B, which was done in the 4th amendment. And so with that PDD, there is the 3 DSFRs. So one of DSFR 1 is going to be the 50 by 110. DSFR 2 is going to be the 60 by 120, and then the DSFR 3 is going to be the 70 by 120. So that has previously been reviewed by the commission, and that was with the PDD 4th Amendment. And so with this PDD amendment for the 6, for the 2.5 acres, is going to follow under that Module 3B. So with that, the proposed cross-line PDD 6 amendment will incorporate the addition of the approximately 2.4 acres into the existing PDD area. So just to kind of show you as well, it's also on page 4. These are the DSFRs 1, 2, and 3. The newly added area will be extension of the aesthetics of the already existing crossline, so the meandering trail systems, the intimate cul-de-sacs, the landscaping, all of that will be still implemented within this PDD. So just kind of wanted to provide a conceptual plan just to kind of give reference. So here is Lower Seguin, FM 1518, and here is that small little parcel that was kind of the outlier with the last one. So with the proposed PDD amendment, it meets the intent of the previously approved PDDs, the rules and regulations set forth by Crossvine. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the Crossvine PDD 6 amendment. The applicant is here if there is any questions. If not, I can answer them as well.
All right, thank you, Megan. Does he wish to make a presentation?
Commissioners, I'm available. I think Megan did a great job of laying out exactly what we're doing. We're just trying to fill in a hole,
Right.
small hole, and so nothing substantive beyond that is included in the PDD amendment.
All right.
Certainly available to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, so this is a public hearing. Anyone want to add, talk, throw their 2 cents worth in? No? All right, commissioners? I've got one real quick. Typically, we see a number of lots when we look at a PDD and we see these different lot dimensions, and typically there's a chart that says no more than this number of this one and this number of that one, and I don't see that here. Was that because those numbers were already in the previous, where we were?
So unfortunately, I believe I do know the chart you are talking about that you typically do see. Unfortunately, I did not include that in the presentation.
Okay.
But I'm not sure in the chart itself if it built upon what was already allocated for Module 3B when it was approved for the 4th Amendment. I'm not sure if that was, if there was additions made with these 2.5 acres allocated into the new PDD.
Well, yeah, maybe you know the answer. Basically, and it's a small piece of property, so we're not talking about a lot of lots. But if you already, we can see that you've already kind of laid out your master plan, even when you didn't have these parcels, because we can see how they fit in there. So have you already accounted for the number of lots you may get out of this?
What happened is, once we were able to reach an agreement with the property owner and bring it in, it made us go back and have to redesign the subdivision, or the master plan. And so we're solidifying that right now, and then we'll be coming to the city with it. As you pointed out, I don't think it's going to add that many lots, because in our development, we're getting 2 to 2.5 lots per acre, where your typical development is more in the 3.5 to 4 range. So, don't think you're going to see much of a change in
Right.
what that distribution is. It's not going to move the needle, I guess is the best.
Yeah, I mean, if you, using your numbers, you're looking at maybe 5 or 6
Yeah,
additional lots.
probably.
So, okay, all right, thank you. Commissioners, anybody else?
And really what this allows us to do is a much more aesthetically pleasing development. You're not going to have this parcel out, and I think what happened was the individual we bought it from finally realized that, yeah, he was going to, in a sense, be frozen out. And so it worked out to be a win-win for all of us.
All right, thank you again. Commissioners, anyone else? All right, and once again, on this one, we're looking for a recommendation to City Council.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of ZC 2021-012 to City Council.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion to approve from, or recommend approval from Commissioner Odom and a second from Commissioner Platt. Any further discussion? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 4 aye, none opposed, that motion passes. Thank you. Okay, item number 6, items for individual consideration. Number 6A, WA 2021-007, consider and act upon a request for approval of a waiver request in relation to on-site sewage facilities for the preliminary plat of Sanchez Residential File Road subdivision, a 2.051 acre tract of land generally located 1,900 feet northeast of the intersection of File Road and IH-10 Access Road, City of Schertz, Bexar County, Texas. Megan?
Commission, this is for WA 2021-007 for Sanchez Residential Sewer Waiver, Megan Harrison, planner. So to provide reference to the property here is outlined in green, File Road, and then off the screen to the south is IH-10. The waiver request was submitted by the engineering who represented the applicant. They are requesting under UDC 2115-3B to not connect to public sanitary sewer. With the in the research that they did find that there was a SARA line that is currently not constructed, that is about 1,500 feet away. And then the nearest city sewer line is 12,100 linear feet away. And so with that, the engineering department reviewed the request, looked at the sewer line locations in accordance to the property, and found that it was reasonable to allow them to not connect to public sanitary sewer in order to put in an on-site septic sewage facility. So with that, the waiver request was reviewed by the engineering department and is consistent with other waivers that they have reviewed and approved. Therefore, staff is making a recommendation based on the engineering department's recommendation as well to approve the waiver request for Sanchez Residential Sewer. The applicant is here in case there is any questions, but I'm also here to answer as well.
All right, thank you. Would you like to address it? You're not required. If you just want to answer questions, that's okay. All right. Commissioners? Is it 1,700 feet or 1,900 feet?
So it's 1,900 feet, the property is 1,900 feet from the intersection of IH-10 and File Road, and then the sewer line, which would be the Sarah sewer line, which is currently not constructed, it's 1,500 linear feet.
Okay.
And then to the city is 12.
Well, I'm sorry, Megan, that's what I meant to ask you. And I'm being nitpicky here. You say 1,500, the applicant says 1,700, so I'm just being nitpicky. I did want to ask you, though, well, we'll talk about it at plat time. I think it's pretty clear here that this, especially given the value of the property, that, this is kind of a, but, I'll tell you what, personally, I'd like to see is when Sarah finally puts that line in, I'd like to see the city go up there and run a sewer line down File Road, because otherwise, Yeah, because, I've made that, we run water lines, why don't we run sewer lines? Anyway, okay, anybody else have anything?
I'll pick another nit if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
The letter from the city references Guadalupe County for permitting for a OSSF. I know you guys know better, it's Bear County.
Correct.
I didn't either, so thank you. Anyone else? All right, this is our decision this evening. We can either approve this request or deny it.
Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve WA 2021-007 as presented.
Motion to approve from Commissioner
Second.
Platt,
Second.
a second from Commissioner Broad. Any other further questions, discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 4 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item B, PC 2021-044, consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the Sanchez Residential File Road subdivision, a 2.051 acre tract of land located approximately 1,900 feet northeast of the intersection of File Road and IH-10 Access Road, City of Schertz, Bear County.
Good evening again, Commission. PC 2021-044, for this is the Sanchez preliminary plat that you just saw the waiver request for. So again, just for reference, this is the property outlined in green. Here is the preliminary plat exhibit. So with the approval by the commission, they will be allowed to put in their on-site septic facility. They will have to go through Bear County for the permits and everything like that. The property, with it being located on File Road, they will be doing 15-foot right-of-way dedication, as it will, right now it's currently not built out to its full standard, so it will need to be, they will be doing that. The property is currently zoned single-family residential agricultural, so it's already allotted to be for a single-family dwelling. The property will be serviced by City of Schertz water, and then of course, like I said, they will be doing the on-site septic facility. The drainage was reviewed by the city engineer with the preliminary plat. They did review it and found, no further comments, and so the city engineer has reviewed that. With all of that, the plat exhibit was reviewed by Public Works, Fire, Planning, and Engineering. They found no further comments, and so with that, staff recommends approval of the Sanchez Residential File Road preliminary plat. Again, the applicant is here in case there's any questions.
All right, thank you, Megan. Commissioners, discussion? I have a couple questions. If you'll bring back the aerial. Oh, the
Oh,
aerial
aerial.
photograph. Yeah, there
My
you go.
apologies, it's been a long day.
No, that's okay, Megan. So the proposed 70-foot right-of-way planned commercial collector, is that curved line there where it actually cuts through the corner. But once again, those aren't set; those are just conceptual.
Correct, those are conceptual. So that at the time, when that is being developed, it could move further up
Okay.
off of that property. But yes, it is conceptual.
So the follow-on question to that is when I look at the preliminary plat itself, your next slide, down there on File Road, I see a 15-foot right-of-way dedication that is also apparently a 14-foot gas, electric, television, and cable TV easement. So the easement and the right-of-way dedication. So we're going to have utilities in our right-of-way. So what happens then when we go out there to actually widen and improve File Road? Are we then going to have to move those utilities out of that right-of-way, or?
So based on how it looks, I mean, it would assume that if they were to be putting, a utility in there, and if a whenever File Road, whether that be 5, 10 years down the road, if there was a utility located within the right-of-way and needed to be moved, then it would in fact have to be moved.
And where would they go? Let me just jump to the point I'm making now is, again, looking to the future. If we then have to move those out of the right-of-way, we are then on the hook, I guess, for obtaining a new easement through the property. Brian, yes, no? Sure, come on up. You can help us out.
So the right-of-way there is 80 feet. So the pavement is about 18 feet right now, where you have 9 feet. So you, from the edge of the pavement to the property line, you still have quite a big space there to put any type of utilities, whether they're underground or overhead, or even if you need storm infrastructure, like a swell or culverts or whatever it is.
Okay.
I think there's plenty of space if utilities are concerned.
Okay, yeah,
15 feet additional right-of-way that the property owner is dedicating, that's for in the future, when the road needs to expand, you still have that green space between the.
yeah, and I tend to forget that right-of-way doesn't mean pavement, okay? Yeah, I forget that. So I think that makes sense. Thank you.
We also have existing overhead, we did in the previous discussion, on this side.
Okay,
So again, it's part of this, and I think that was the waiver stuff and some of the questions. It's not perfect in theory. It's
Yeah.
always messier and
And there'll be potential right-of-way on the opposite side as well. Right, yeah.
Correct. When they come into plat, they would do the same.
But the utilities will only be on one side.
all right, thank you. Commissioners, anything else? All right, this is our action this evening to either approve or deny this preliminary plat.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve PC 2021-044 as presented.
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Odom and a second from Commissioner Platt. Okay, any further discussion or questions? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 4 ayes, none opposed, that motion passes. Thank you, sir. Item number 7 is a workshop and discussion. Workshop or a walkshop and discussion to provide an overview and summary of the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission Subcommittee.
All right.
Okay,
So the majority of the commission who's here tonight was here when we did this. So I mean this sincerely. Chime in because it may be very helpful. I think the other thing we may do is we may come back with this because I think it's really important for all of the commission to hear kind of the what and why and have this conversation. Because the goal of this, you'll remember, is we're trying to get everybody on the same page. And it's, you have lamented it, staff has lamented it, and it's kind of this question of, council, what do you want? What do you have, what do you want to happen? And you need to put down on paper what you want to have happen. And I think it's helpful because of some of the discussion of, it's never perfect. We always have to flex a little bit, that we want to limit that to understand the why with it. So just so y'all know how often we did this, it was Whitaker, Dolly, and Scagliola, Bro, Platt, and Odom. Again, Ken Greenwald's mom initially passed away, but went through those 6 members. And we had a total of, I think, 7 meetings, which is shocking that we had a total of 7 meetings for it. But I think really it was just making sure we all sort of were able to stew on some of the concepts a bit, hear more concepts, figure out how they work together, and kind of go, okay, when I thought this, I wasn't thinking about this too, and now that I think about this, it affects this. If but then here's this other thing. So it's all interrelated. But really what we focused on were lit sizes, not lit sizes, but lot sizes. Again, typical of my sort of work on this, we get lit sizes, not lot sizes, density, setbacks, the concept of straight zoning versus PDDs, plan development district, design standards, and then we touched at the end really the fee mitigation fee cap, so we'll hit that too. But the gist of the big sort of shocker change, if you've listened to council talk at many times over the past years, which is we amended the code, we don't allow new R6 and R7 zoning to come in. Those are the smallest lots. And what the committee came back with is we're okay with it under a couple conditions. One is we're going to limit the size area of straight zoning for R6 and R7. So the 7,200 R6, it's up to 40 acres. If you've got a parcel bigger than 40, you're not going all R6, or R7 up to 30 acres is allowable. So the idea is that person with a small piece of land, a smaller, relatively smaller piece of land, he says, I don't have the ability to do this big mix of lot sizes. If it's that small, we'll give it to you. Now, caveat was, but we're not letting everybody come in and say, I got this small piece, small piece, small piece, small piece, and they all end up as R7s. We're going to define that in the comp plan and limit kind of by area. So within an area, you've got this many. It's a little bit first person to come in and get it, gets it. We talked about maybe doing it with an SUP so it expires if you don't develop on that. But we'll work that out. But again, the idea was we're going to allow it, but it's in a limited amount, and we want to think through, as we write the ordinance, all the ways people can try to end run it, because we don't want you to end run it. But again, the guy that comes in and says, I'm buying this farmer out, he's got 25 acres, what do you want me to do? In theory, if nobody else is coming in that area, we'll grant them straight zoning of it. Provided, and this is the second, that these design standards, the things that we've incorporated into our residential PDDs to make them nicer, we build those into standards everybody has to do, even by right. So the curvilinear streets, some open space were really the two big ones. So you've got to, we'll make those amendments at the same time. So as an example, if a property is larger than 70 acres, could be developed as requested, the 40 acres R6, 30 acres or R7, and the rest would be R2 or a PDD concept. So the idea is to give some flexibility for the smaller pieces of land, and that was really the idea. If you've got a big tract, you need to go bigger zoning or a PDD route. The other is we outline these design standards, and I will say this, we kicked around a number of different design standards, and I think part of what shaped, speak up the three of y'all, part of what shaped the discussion on what we allow in terms of straight zoning and what we don't require in terms of design standards is this idea that all of these things that we require push up the price of the houses. And that, you know, the houses that are coming in, even the ones that maybe we're not the biggest fans of, they're fairly expensive. There's nothing coming in that's real cheap. We talked about that. Good luck finding a house under $250,000 in Schertz. And I think some of the concerns that we talked about were concerns that we would go the way of other communities that really had all this. And I think the feeling was, yeah, we have a way to not have that happen. So again, everything's relative. So affordable for Schertz, maybe you can get a house for $250,000. You're not going to be able to get a house for $150,000 even with these standards kind of coming in. It's all relative. So a couple things that we felt like kind of really made the neighborhood work better, some TSAC recall, which is when you've got a mailbox, you've got to provide 2 off-street parking spaces associated with that mailbox. Will allow a bump out, and it may actually be right-of-way, so you can do kind of a couple parallel spaces in front. You can do head-in off to the side. But the idea is you bow the pavement of the street out in to sort of expand the right-of-way there, probably, and provide parallel spaces out of the lane of traffic. And again, I think the feeling was 2 is probably sufficient. Again, trying to not overkill it by, you need 4, no, we'll do 2, we'll make it work. Again, had the concept that the mailboxes must be covered. Again, I think some people must have known postal workers who stand out in the rain delivering mail, and the idea was, you know, let's cover them. It does a couple things. One is, he or she is not standing in the rain, residents getting out aren't standing in the rain, opening up their things. And the other that I think we talked about was this standard would allow, if we can talk to the school district, they can maybe do bus pickup and drop off at the mailboxes. That would allow them to do it. Kids could stand there under a little bit of cover in the elements as well, so I think served a dual purpose. The other thing we talked about was really, and we went round and round of how much difference does this make, how much does it not, but I think generally the feeling was, well, not that this dictates the neighborhood, it's nice to have some curve in the streets. That we can find some examples where they're fairly straight and it's nice, we can find some examples with curve that aren't great, but generally I think the feeling, and we talked about this a long time, is providing some deflection in the street so you don't have that monotonous straight shot is useful. So we'll work to flesh this out, but generally the idea is provide a certain length, you have to deflect a certain amount so it gets you a certain amount of curve in the road so that you're not just standing there and looking straight down forever, go to the next street looking straight down forever. You got a bit of variation going forward. The other big one we talked about was usable open space. So again, larger developments often provide land as part of that requirement. So if you're providing a park, a city park within your project, such as Parklands, for example, or Homestead, for example, you wouldn't have to do this. But if you're not doing that, you have to provide usable open space, and we'll define that. So it's not the leftover piece way in the corner, it's not encumbered by a bunch of easements, it's not in the detention basin, it's 1 acre for the first 100 lots and then a ½ acre for the next 100 lots, what we talked about, and it needs to be sort of generally dispersed through the neighborhood in ½ acre provision. So if you've got 300 lots, we want more than one little pod of open space. We don't want it all at one end or all in one spot. So the idea is to provide that usable open space, and we feel like staff can do that as part of the development review standards with some language. We don't think that's one. Once we lay out the requirement, we think we'll be able to work it out with most developers, but there is going to be some judgment back and forth on it. And so that's the idea. So really what we're doing is curvilinear, open space, and then mailbox coming in, and then we're limiting the amount of straight zoning that we're doing going forward. And again, when we talked about this, the purpose of the PDD is allowing, innovations and development. We think there are always going to be some of those, particularly when you have a lot of land. So somebody coming in with 400 acres is probably going to come in and do a PDD route, because what we want to limit through that, if you want to do the smaller lots, we talked about not wanting them all in one corner of the development, space throughout, limit the size of those pods. There'll still be that judgment. But I think what this gives us is, based on the previous discussion of allowing the R6 and R7, it gives us the ability to say some of that smaller stuff is okay, and we've often struggled with that. The PDD comes in with some 6,600 square foot or 6,700, and we go, are we okay allowing that at all? And really this says we're okay with allowing some of that stuff small, but it's a limited amount going forward that will define within those PDD standards. And so that was the other element, is we want to bulk up our residential PDD standards to really lay out, this is what we expect you to do. It's not a blank slate. You've got criteria, you've got restrictions on it, and so here's this kind of window we want you to typically come into. So if we think about those PDDs that we're kind of okay with as we modify this a bit, that's what it would define, to keep us from getting folks coming in with something that's just totally outside of that. But again, it says some smaller lots are okay. And then, so we developed that list of items. And so again, an example might be on a 100 acre, you get 50 acres of R2, which is 8,400, 30 acres of R6, 7,200, 20 acres of R7, which is 6,600. We kind of talked about going that desired median and mean, and again, having Dr. Scaglio on there teaching stats, but again, reminded him, the benefit of the median and the mean is what you get is you get the average. So you go average days, and what's the average size? Okay, it's got to meet that. The problem with that is you can skew that. If you've got a couple really big lots, it skews it upward, which is why we use the median as well, which is you order them from largest to smallest. You go halfway down the list and go, what is that? And by doing that, you're able to not skew it that same way using those two together. But really, I think that 7,600 is the big thing. What is our standard for that median and mean? And I think we've, again, vacillated on that a bit. Is it 8,000? Is it 8,200? Is it 8,600? And so we came to 7,600, which I think reflects we're willing to not be as big overall, and also reflect that if we're going to allow those R6 and R7s, we can't maintain this 8,600, 8,400, because it means the developer's having to do so many much bigger lots that they say, that doesn't really work for me. I've got to have something kind of within the same range. And so that's the deal. And again, we talked about clustering. It's no longer just acceptable to have pods of just R6 and R7. We want those broken up and dispersed a little bit as we come forward. So again, I think the effort we're going to have to do is probably go through working up this language that we'll adopt in the UDC that says this is the criteria for PDD. It's not going to be set in stone, but hopefully 90% of the P&Z commissioners read it and say, we come to the same thing. We may not all, but everybody kind of knows where we're headed with it. And that's sort of the gist of it. And let me stop there to see if the committee members want to say something.
I'll say something just real quick. I mean, overall, the meetings that we did have, we came to a consensus. There was disagreement here and there, but I think in just the atmosphere of, or the want or need, the desire for consensus, we came together, and not everybody got exactly what they wanted, but I think we came together for a pretty fair change versus what we had 10 years ago. What we changed to 10 years ago, not allowing those R6 and R7, and then all of a sudden having all these PDDs come in.
Yeah.
And the PDDs basically just doing that, doing even smaller than R6 and R7. By doing this, we at least say nothing smaller than that. And we also address side setbacks too. None of this 5-foot side setbacks. It's all going to be 10 no matter what. So it was, each meeting was very fruitful, I thought. A lot of really good discussion. And I mean, as far as the consensus goes, it was very acceptable to me.
I think it's important we do, because I think we need to lay this stuff out. Yeah, we achieved some general consensus, but it wasn't unanimous on the whole thing, and I think we still have some different philosophical points of view that are important to recognize.
Well, here's what happens when you don't talk. I talk. So, no, I'm very encouraged by what I see here, and I want to thank you three for the time and effort you put into this. I think it addresses a lot of my concerns as the chairman of the commission, and I realize there's still a lot of work left, because now you got to turn this into words. But I think there's enough flexibility in here, and you know, my favorite example is the one, and I'm not going to remember, Saddlebrook out there, where they clustered those. It certainly addresses that. It doesn't say you can't do that. It just says you can't put them. We don't want to see them all together. And that, you know, I think it's Mr. Pine, right? Is that his last name from?
Crossvine?
Crossvine?
Price.
Price, okay. But I see that when you look at the PDD out there for, and most of the PDDs that come to us, you know, you see them because that gives them more flexibility in how they lay out the land. So I'm very encouraged, and Jimmy, thank you. One of the things I had here was setbacks with a question mark. Thank you for answering that for me. But Brian and guys, I'm encouraged by what I see here. I think this will go a long way towards you know, bringing P&Z and the city council onto the same page. It certainly would give us a better idea of what's acceptable to them, which is what we don't really have right now, so.
And maybe just to touch on kind of why this was important to staff, what we didn't want to do is kick off the comp plan effort without having settled this issue of what do our residential areas need to look like. And so while there's work to go in and get this adopted before we start doing it, once we do the same little thing with council and they, assuming they nod, we'll put out the RFQ for the comp plan and get going on that. But again, what we didn't want to do, much like the joint work sessions and much like the 7 meetings, is we would bog down our comp plan effort on this one topic and not get anywhere. And so we felt like we needed to kind of set this direction.
I'll say this too, everybody was very open to all the discussions. There were times that people really wanted to go straight zoning and just straight zoning. We were able to still discuss the PDDs, keep that, but give the PDDs almost the same requirements as straight zoning, just a little more flexibility for those developers that want to do PDDs. Also, I'd like to just say too, thanks to the staff, because y'all did a great job with each of the meetings. Unfortunately, I was tele through 6 of them, only in person for 1, and I want to say thank you also to the city IT department too for helping me out with that. I was very grateful, and really it was a good opportunity to learn a lot about what's going on as far as the PDD, or as far as the development plans go, and so just want to say thanks to everybody.
Anyone else? All right.
So what we'll do is we'll do a similar thing with council. Assuming they're good with it, that'll let us kick off the comp plan, and then we'll start coming around and looking at adopting the stuff. The other thing we talked about that came up is our tree mitigation. And again, what I've got is sort of the standard you've got. So the tree mitigation is basically $100 per inch of mitigation. And so protected class trees, 8 to 24 inches, mitigated at a 1-to-1 ratio. If it's 24 inches or greater, mitigated at a 3-to-1. So basically, it equates to $300 per inch. And DBH is diameter at breast height, so it's defined as whatever, 4 feet or something like that. The ordinance generally works pretty well, but the idea is to get developers to be thoughtful about trees. The idea is, look, if you just want to come in and cut them down, you're going to pay a bunch of money. If you think about it and you work around some, you can pay less money, and we preserve trees. And I think it works that way. The problem on ours are not the lots with a few trees on it, it's the heavily wooded lot. It's the lot covered in trees, and despite their best efforts, he's going, you're killing me on this stuff. And again, so the Kellum Medical, that was up around $250,000, something like that. Bush's Chicken, $60,000. You know, we have people pay $250,000 in tree mitigation that if you saw the site after developed, you go, oh, that's a lot of trees. You know, they planted trees to try to do that instead of paying the fee. They've tried to save where they can. But again, as we've talked about, in part because of our drainage ordinances that say you have to handle it a certain way and you have to detain, that they're a bit limited, and that grading often takes out the root zone. So what we came up with was try a simplified thing, which is basically say you're capped at $10,000 per acre, and that's the most you pay. So even if you've got a 1-acre site, and we went through like Bush's Chicken and say that's $60,000, you don't pay $60,000, you just pay $10,000. You still have to preserve that minimum percentage of trees on the site, so you can't take them all out. It just sort of caps you at that. And so what this does is like Revolution Baptist Church that's going in near Wiederstein and 3009, you know, brings them down from, I forget what their mitigation was projected, you know, yeah, 400,000, something like that, to a more manageable number. They're still going to pay a lot. They're still not going to be happy. But we think the 10,000 is enough to get most folks to be thoughtful about trees and make it a bit more fair. And so I will say this with this one, this is a pretty easy one to amend the code. Let's see how it works. If it's not working and we find people, we can come back and we can tweak it and we can adjust. But I think the other thing that staff liked with this is it's really simple to apply. And one of the things that, again, I think we're hearing council say is, you know, how can we not bog down the development process on things that don't add a lot of value? And so I think the idea of this is, rather than get into a real tricky sort of system, go $10,000 per acre and be done with it. I will say I got a call from Maggie with the chamber. She indicated she likes the idea, glad we're making the amendment. Her members are happy with it. Or is everybody fully? Probably not, but generally they're supportive of it, think it's a pretty good compromise. And I think the conversations I've had with her, she understands that, hey, we want to keep Schertz being a nice community. It's why people are moving here, why businesses are coming here, and feel like this strikes that balance. So again, just wanted to let you know that. This is a more standard run of the UDC to run the amendment, but just wanted to make sure we didn't kind of hit a buzzsaw as we did it and go, y'all are crazy. So. But this we touched on really briefly, so I think we'll talk about it at length when we run the ordinance, but the idea was to say, yeah, in concept, I'm okay with it. Let's see devil in the detail when it comes forward.
Well, again, part of the problem, and you know, that one of the issues that's come up is fairness to developers. If the guy is lucky enough to, well, you know, you go out to southern Schertz, there's not a whole lot of heavily wooded land. Mm-hmm. But if you come up into the northern part of the city and all you want to do is, as you said, and we had one where he owned some property, I think, on the east side of 3009, and he's going to pay a lot more for his development than the guy that was lucky enough to find a cleared lot on the other side. So, but you know, it just needs, as you say, it needs to be enough to make them stop and think about what they're doing. So, anyone else have any comments?
We may run this one quicker. We may do the thing, just get it on the books, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
And that'll take us a few meetings with P&Z to flesh out and work out. So.
Sounds like a plan.
Otherwise, that's it.
All right.
We'll brief council, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, item number 8, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on future planning and zoning agenda. Anyone have anything? Item B, announcements by commissioners. Anyone? I attended the APA Texas chapter conference up in Fort Worth a couple weeks ago, and once again, I hope you folks had a chance to participate online. They had, if I remember right, they had 650 people show up in person, and I was telling someone that initially caused some issues because they hadn't planned enough lunch space, but they were able to work that out with the hotel. But a lot of good things, and it was I'm not going to remember the acronym they were used because it was Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and New Mexico. I think they were. Oh, it was called a cross-chapter conference because I think there were actually four chapters. So. And I may come bugging you guys because I saw a couple of vendors up there that I really think the city should be talking to, but, you know, we'll see. Okay, city staff, you have any announcements?
None at this time.
Okay. And then we've got the regular information in our packets about the current status of what's going on with what we've sent to city council. All right, there being no further business, this meeting's adjourned.